With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko has urged lowering Ukraine's draft age again as the country faces a worsening manpower crisis amid record desertions and war fatigue. After reducing the draft age from 27 to 25 last year, Klitschko said Ukraine still has huge problems with soldiers as men flee abroad, with EU asylum data showing a sharp rise in Ukrainian migrants. He suggested lowering the age to 22 or 23, though 86% of Ukrainians oppose such a move. Forced conscriptions and corruption scandals have fueled anger, while Russia accuses the West of using Ukraine as a proxy. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov accused Britain of using the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia as pawns to provoke conflict with Moscow, reviving Cold War-style rhetoric about perfidious Albion. Lavrov said Western Europe, led by the UK, treats the former Soviet Republic with disdain while using them to spearhead provocations near Russia's borders. Moscow has long pushed this narrative, alleging the UK manipulates NATO and sabotages peace efforts. Russian officials have previously blamed Britain for espionage, sabotage, and attempted nuclear facility attacks as part of efforts to incite wider war. The European Commission is reportedly developing a centralized EU intelligence service directly under President Ursula von der Leyen's authority. The proposed agency would consolidate national intelligence into a Brussels-controlled body, expanding beyond the existing INTCEN unit. The move, framed as improving coordination and rapid decision-making, would enhance the Commission's security influence, but has raised concerns over sovereignty among member states such as France. Von der Leyen, criticized for mismanagement as Germany's former defense minister, has long supported an EU army and a collective defense strategy. Officials confirmed discussions are ongoing but gave no launch date. Britain has reportedly suspended sharing Caribbean counter-narcotics intelligence with the U.S. after Washington began using airstrikes to sink cartel boats, citing human rights concerns. The decision, believed to stem from Prime Minister Keir Starmer's human rights lawyer advisors, drew backlash from former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who said it killed a special relationship. Reform UK officials accused the government of protecting traffickers while neglecting border security. Military leaders also warned that excessive legal oversight is weakening the armed forces' effectiveness. The move further strains Anglo-American defense ties and undermines joint counter-drug operations in the region. Corporate media outlets are attempting to portray the BBC's leadership resignations as part of a right-wing plot, following revelations that the broadcaster doctored President Trump's January 6th speech to appear insightful. The scandal erupted after leaked memos showed the BBC edited separate remarks together, misleading viewers before the 2024 election. Director General Tim Davie and news CEO Deborah Turnus resigned, but critics say the media is downplaying the deception. President Trump has threatened a $1 billion lawsuit unless the BBC issues a full retraction and apology, calling the edits false and defamatory. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer labelled Nigel Farage's Reform UK party toxic and racist, accusing it of fueling national division over immigration. Speaking on ITV's Lorraine, Starmer rejected claims that voters were turning to Reform due to genuine border concerns, instead blaming the party for spreading fear.
Country apart. Some of the rhetoric we're hearing, racist rhetoric, divisive rhetoric, that frankly I thought we'd dealt with decades ago, is returning to politics, and it makes people feel very scared. And we have to stand up to that racism, to that division, and we have to proudly say that to be British is to be concerned for others, is to be reasonable, is to be tolerant and compassionate, and we're proud of that.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome to a program called The Protagonists for those who are new here. This is on The World Today. Our topic today, it's in fact, very relevant. Digital ID and what you don't know. Australia introduced the digital ID in 2024 and is expanding its use. The information available emphasises its convenience, its voluntary nature and strict privacy conditions. However, it must be a major concern that it's expanding rapidly to so many essential government and private sector services, such as banking, and is already mandatory if you're a company director in Australia. It's inconceivable that it will not become mandatory for accessing essential services. It's also of a major concern what this digital infrastructure allows the governments to do to introduce digital currencies such as Central Bank Digital Currencies, which are CBDCs, further eroding anonymity and personal freedom in the financial sphere. The development of social credit systems and intrusive surveillance of citizens begins with a digital ID. The government has already outsourced to social media companies, which are also tech behemoths, a choice in whether they use government ID or not for age assurance. On December 27, all users in Australia will need to verify their age when using search engines. At this point, your digital ID will link to all your social media posts and your internet shopping with these companies, which are themselves subservient to governments around the globe. The Australian government has been entirely dishonest about why it is introducing government ID. They are not doing it for our convenience. A large number of countries have or are about to introduce digital ID. Australia is a signatory to the UN's Pact for the Future. Why wouldn't this lead to the national digital ID system being linked to international digital identity programs, dangerously undermining our liberties? Our guest today will help us fill in the blanks of what we don't know about digital IDs, what we should fear, and why we need to fight these intrusions. Our first guest is Stephen Tripp, President of Australians for Better Government and Vice President of Let's Rethink Renewables. Stephen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me, and hello to your audience.
Yes, I'm just, before we get into the other guest, it's the digital ID. Rowan Dean on the show on Sky talks about how bad it is, and it's he believes it's the end of freedom. Just quickly, what's your thoughts?
Look, I'm concerned about it. We have a distrust of government ever since the COVID period. A lot of people have distrust of government. Even prior to COVID, and we see these incremental rollouts happen, and it's very concerning. It seems like a very similar rollout to the COVID mandates and the vaccine mandates that we saw back in 2020, 2021, and 2022. Look, I did a podcast with a guy called Rick Richardson on my show, Commanding the Narrative, on Monday. Now, Rick is an IT tech specialist. He wrote software activation programs back in the early 90s, which Microsoft then took from him. And he went to a lawsuit and won a case where he was awarded $530 million from Microsoft. So he's definitely got the knowledge in setting up programs. And he's actually working in the digital ID space at the moment. And he's actually advising the e-safety commissioner directly, and also the bureaucracy that's actually rolling this out. And he tried to alleviate some of the concerns. And now, the big problem with digital ID, there's two systems that we really need to focus on. One's a centralized system, which is what we see in China, where they have a social credit system. That's where all the information leads back to a central hub, and then they can turn off your banking, they can turn off your ability to travel and things like that. There's another system which is decentralized digital ID, which Rick said the digital ID legislation here in Australia actually leans heavily towards. Apparently in the background, and a lot of this stuff is still being worked out, and I think that's a big problem. A lot of this stuff is not transparent, it's not being released to the public. That's why the public are having to fill in a lot of the gaps in their, I guess, leaning negatively and thinking that there's a nefarious plot going on. Rick's saying, no, that's not the case. He's actually proud to be in the space behind the scenes where a lot of people, he says, and this is his words, focus on individual sovereignty and protecting people's privacy and moving more towards this decentralized system. And he says that a decentralized system can actually protect your privacy better than physical forms can. And I don't know if I've got time to explain it to you, but a decentralized digital ID system, according to him, can actually protect your rights better than paper systems. So let's say, for example, this age verification system that's about to be implemented. Mike, you wake up on December 11th and you go on Facebook and it says you need to prove your age to be able to use Facebook. Well, the old system would be you would upload your driver's license, and then Facebook would have all those details. It would have your photo, it would have your address, your name, your date of birth, even your driver's license number. It would have all those details, and then it would have to keep that on a server, which is available to be hacked potentially. If you have a decentralized digital ID system, each one of those lines would then become an attribute, and that decentralized system would then only pass on those specific attributes that are needed by, say, for example, Facebook. So Facebook went to this digital ID system and said, we need to verify the age of Mike Ryan. Then all it would say is that Mike Ryan has a current government issued driver's license, it's current, and his age is over 18. It would not give any further details like your name, your address, or your driver's license number, even your date of birth. So that's where digital ID can actually work well. It can actually protect our privacy more than the systems that we have now. But the problem is it's in the hands of government at the moment. I think that's a big, big problem. It can be obviously taken over by nefarious characters. So we need to have more discussions like this to also highlight the positives of digital ID, to put pressure on government departments to make sure that they go down the more positive route of decentralized digital ID rather than the centralized digital ID that we see in places like China.
Tim Hinchliffe is an independent journalist and a great friend of not only TNT, but what we're doing now. Tim, thanks for joining us. Do you think that the digital ID is the eventual end of our freedoms?
Well, thanks for having me on. It's great to see you again. It's the stepping stone, and I think a lot of people get confused, or there's different terms being thrown around between digital ID, like identification, and digital identity. Identification is just something that proves who you are. Identity is you. It's everything. It's your characteristics. It's your personality. It's your behavior. Um, so together, it it doesn't matter to me whether it's like we're arguing digital ID, digital identity. It all feeds in to this one big system called digital public infrastructure. Digital public infrastructure is a civic technology stack consisting of three main components: digital identity, fast payment systems, and then massive data sharing between private and public entities. Um, from there, anything that you say online, offline, can be used against you. It's a whole system that's interoperable. So when he's talking about Stephen's talking about decentralization, he also mentioned people behind it. Can you trust who's running this thing? For me, the interoperability of everything, it means it doesn't matter um, whether it's decentralized or not, because these things, it's meant to go across borders. It's meant to go between public and private sectors. And so what you have there is a global public-private partnership, which is basically the fusion of corporation and state. Um, and the whole idea of digital ID, digital identity, and digital identification, I don't think that's something that comes from the people. That's a top-down agenda. No one asked for it, but now it's going global. It's going everywhere. I mean, it's coming from the UN. What's just coming up here in 6 days, the Business 20, B20 group is meeting in Johannesburg, South Africa for their meeting ahead of the G20. And DPI, Digital Public Infrastructure, Digital ID, all of that is a huge component of it. And then from there, what the UN talks about information integrity. And once your ID, digital ID, is linked to everything you do online, anything you say, can, or do can be used against you. It can be programmed. It can be policed. So yeah, I see digital ID, identity, identification, as something, the very first step into eroding lots of privacy and leading towards social credit.
Tony Nikolic, as a lawyer and criminologist and advocate for human rights, How dangerous is the digital ID for global freedom? We actually should put the your microphone on first, Tony. The thing says on. There you are. Hang on, no, we still can't hear you at the moment. So what we might do, if he could just panic, this is professional panic here.
What about now?
You're sounding beautiful.
Yeah.
You can continue.
Okay, my apologies for that. I think the encroachment upon civil liberties is something that I've been working on for many years, actually. I've published in a lot of these areas. But the most important thing is this. I think the reframing, I think Tim and Steve have eloquently put some points forward that essentially hit down the heart of what this is all about. Not only your personal sovereignty, but how you tie into your own sovereignty, which is a larger structural issue. The interoperability of how this works within your society. Importantly, one of the major facets, and I wrote about this in The Spectator, was your digital ID. There are four key attributes. So we can't just look at it in isolation of being an ID. Again, even on that structuralist perspective, I even talk about it. We're reframing this as an ID. Tim pointed towards that in his opening, where he spoke about the ID itself being put towards people, so your identity and this and that. But we already have the passports, we already have the licenses and the physical aspects of it. What we have here, in my view anyway, ties back into, say, someone like Michel Foucault, who was talking about the panopticon and this digital prison where in the middle you have an ever-seeing eye. And I want to touch on four major points that I touched on with respect to my Spectator article, and that is the digital ID is essentially who you are, right? There's your identity that Tim's talking about. The interoperability of data, again, the interoperability, this is all about, in simple layman terms, what you do. And I'll come back to that in a moment. The other part is what you say. So it's going to monitor what you say and how you say it. And obviously we'll get to that in another moment there. And again, that's also going to tie into your programmable payments, how you interact in society. One of the larger parts of what we have here is the apps. Okay, so there's invariably going to be an app, right? And those apps are going to tie into certain facets of what you do in your personal life. Now, someone says if you're not doing the crime, well, you don't need to do the time. But there's also the other saying is, bring me the person and I'll find you the crime. And that is essentially where we're heading here, right? Because at the end of the day, all these, when they're meshed together, okay, that is the biggest issue here, right? And then we have these special entities that are tied into the Digital Identity Act 2024. But where I'm going with respect to those 4 points is this: is that in that you're going to get metadata, okay, and those apps are going to tie into a metadata. We all know that you've got certain privacy with certain apps, and those apps, for them to operate, they need to know your location, and there's certain other attributes that you put together with those. So that metadata, someone says, well, so what? Well, let me give you an example. For the next 4 months, so what? I agree with you. But over the next year, 2 years, your life is now building a pattern. And as you know, I used to work as a criminologist in major institutions, Mike, and a part of what we often do is we look at patterns, and those patterns often lead us into certain assumptions. Those assumptions can lead into other areas. And again, whether I'm a criminologist or a lawyer, it didn't matter. We're looking at these assumptions, and they build these parts of what's happening. So what ends up happening then on top of that is you start building a footprint, and that footprint is then always being monitored. Here is the panopticon that Michel Foucault talks about. In the center, you're going to have the state, and that state's going to see everything you do. So the panopticon was a prison. It had star formation, and the prison guards could look down every cell or every wing and understand and see what was happening. This is exactly where we're going. Now, in terms of its interoperability, well, that interoperability is going to link into other areas. We cannot understand where those other areas are. And one of the other concerns I have, really, from a legal point, is when we look at interoperability. If you have a look at the Privacy Act here in Australia and how it joins into where we're at, well, a corporation has an obligation to indicate that a breach has occurred. That's its obligation. So if you have a look at some of the big corporate breaches that have occurred here in Australia, their obligation is limited to the extent that a breach has occurred, your ID, your data has hit the web. Okay? That is their obligation. There is no obligation here to remedy that. There is no obligation for compensation. There is no obligation for anyone to be remedied or compensated for what has occurred. Therefore, your identity, and I think we can all agree with every one of these panel members and any single person out there, once your biometric data is compromised, you cannot change that. You can't change that. You can change your password. Great. Corporation A says, you've been breached. I changed my password. Yes, I might need to change my, license details and in this. That may occur, but you are not changing your iris unless someone can tell me how that can be done. But it's these facets that we're talking about. So, in conjunction with what I've just said there, I think it screams of absolute surveillance. There's this technocratic style issue, and again, this is something that we look at. You just mentioned a moment ago on that last show there, where Donald Trump's spliced January 6 statement. We also had the gunshots here with the SAS in the ABC. Obviously, a lot of them don't. Again, they're allegations. That's what's happened. But when you actually dig into the Act, Mike, you'll actually see that the Act actually specifies for the government to authorise and accredit media agencies and these parties as to who they determine are credible. So these are the wider issues where control of the media and everything else that's going on actually splices in to all this. It is dangerous.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Stephen, you're a Australians for Better Government. You're the president of that. It would seem that your job will be much larger if we keep going down the path we're going, because you won't be answerable to, or you won't be able to just question the Australian government, which will probably resemble a council, a local council, because there will be a global government, and all the measures they're doing now fits in lockstep with what they want, which the WEF want, to have this global government. How do we stop that? Because if we lose our right to determine what we do by, for example, our sovereignty with our local, state, or federal member, if they become just like a councillor who can pass on the information to a greater good, a bigger government, how do we stop that? Because at the moment, and I don't know, Tim, if you're up to speed with what's happening in Australia, but the Labor government, and this is not because I don't care about any government at the moment, or any party, but the Labor government at the moment is destroying this country. It's bulldozing all this great forest and stuff to put up wind turbines, ripping out beautiful valleys, putting in hundreds of thousands of solar panels. It's giving our land back to the Indigenous people. It's got all sorts of things. It's got the e-safety, the digital ID. It's got you have to log in, as you said before, on December 27. By the way, they're sneaking that one through 2 days after Christmas and a couple of days before next year, which no one will notice. So, Stephen, how do we stop this? Because at the moment, it would look like the snowball is reaching great speeds. And I think before too long, it's going to be too late and too hard to stop this, this avalanche of governance that's about to hit us.
It's a structural issue, and it goes back to federation and how a constitution was set up. Now, overall, a constitution is a very good document, but there is one line in that constitution that completely wrecks our system of government, and that's in section 64. It's the ministers to sit in parliament line. So what that line states is that the ministers that are selected have to come from the legislature, whether it be the House of Representatives or the Senate. Now, that means that you're picking ministers based on the suboptimal people sitting in Parliament. So suddenly you have a communications minister that's rolling out this digital ID that has no idea about the technology that's required for a digital ID system to be implemented. So they have to outsource their knowledge to the bureaucracy and further. So we're seeing this with the digital ID. The government's turning around going, well, we don't know how to tackle this issue. We're going to pass it on to the social media companies, and it's going to be up to Facebook and Instagram and X to implement these policies that are passed through the government. So that's I think a big problem of all this. You have these suboptimal people heading these departments that have no clue about what they're doing. You mentioned the rollout of renewables. Like, what experience does Chris Bowen have in the energy sector? He basically walked into the local government when he was very young. He was in his 20s, and he's been in Parliament in some shape or form, whether it be local government or federal politics, ever since. So these people are just not up to the task. And I think what's required to fix it, one, we need to address that line in the Constitution, remove that line from the Constitution, and then you can go out and select ministers based on their industry experience. So it'd be great to have someone as communications minister like Rick Richardson, which I mentioned before, someone that's actually worked in the space, developed programs, it leans heavily towards individual sovereignty and personal online freedom. That's where a big answer for me lies. But we need to start moving away from this system where we have these politicians that represent the two parties, and they're basically aligned on this. When was this digital ID system ever taken to an election? It was set up by the Liberals and it was implemented by Labor. So you've got the two major parties pushing for the same policy, and the Australian people were never asked whether we want digital ID. And they go out and they say, well, parents are calling for this. Parents want more safety when it comes to their children using social media. I think it's based on a fallacy. What parent is saying, government, please come and look after my kid. I'm not able to do it on my own. I'm not able to stop my kids from using social media. I think if you're a parent and you're calling for the government to step in and take over your role as a parent, then you're not up to being a parent. I think most parents out there would say, no, I think the responsibility should be with us as the mother and the father to regulate whether our children use social media or not. And I think that shouldn't be a government responsibility. But the problem is you've got these politicians, these ministers that are being ruled by the bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy have to justify their positions to continue getting their big fat paychecks. So that's why you're continuing to see more and more regulation, more and more freedoms being taken away from us, because they need to justify their position and their role. And then, as you said, you've also got these international bodies like the World Economic Forum also putting their influence on, and you've got a minister there going, look, I don't know what to do. I don't have any experience in this space. You've got this entity like the World Economic Forum basically giving me a blueprint of how to roll out policy. Let's just adopt that. That's easy. Let's just go down that role. So it goes back to a structural element of our system. And that's what Australians for Better Government talk about. And it's an issue that doesn't get talked about at all. I think the key is to have more and more discussions, bringing these issues to the surface, and having more solutions-based approach. I think the everyday Australian people, they don't want to be constantly be told all the issues and all the problems that are coming or looming from government. I think they just switch off from that. I think we need to have a more solutions-based approach, and maybe even look at this digital ID issue. Maybe look at the positives. As I was talking about before with the decentralized system, maybe it could enhance our privacy. We need to have discussions like that. We need to be able to excite the Australian people, get them on board, and take them on a journey towards more freedoms, more individual sovereignty, just like they did when they set up our systems to begin with, our constitutions to begin with. They tried to excite people about independence and freedom and those sorts of things.
By the way, Steve, Tim, and Tony, you can jump in wherever you feel like it. By the way, I'm not going to be offended. Just buy me a beer later, which I think Tony will have trouble with that because I owe him about 4 dozen at this stage. Tim?
Well, then, yeah, I'll just jump in right there because he was talking about, looking to government and things. Well, saying that nobody did vote for digital ID. Nobody, but then to actually go forward with it, I don't think that's the path forward. I don't think we need that at all. And I think also what we're not looking at is that apart from whether politicians, one party or the other, to me, that doesn't matter. They come and go. One party can say, hey, we're only going to use this in a decentralized way. We're only going to use this for this. This is only going to be for getting a job. This is only going to be for this. But the next regime that comes in, or whatever, whatever global or emergency is declared, anything can change in whatever moment. But the thing is also is that there are it's the combination of the public and private sectors who want data. This is what digital ID is, not just that one thing. It's not an app. It's not just an app. So you can get rid of a smartphone. They're doing nature ID. The Rockefeller Foundation, United Nations, doing that for all of biodiversity, a DPI stack for that. They're doing that to animals with their nose prints. I'm pretty sure they don't sign up for digital ID. They don't have a smartphone. Okay, but
They're
when it
taking
comes
your
to
data. They're taking your data now already. I mean, you only have to talk in front of your phone. You mentioned like a new bed, and suddenly you're getting all these ads for new
Okay,
beds.
so
It's
right now,
happening already.
what we're talking about right now. So this is what they call commercially available information or publicly available information. This is what's getting sucked up by data brokers who sell it to intelligence communities, especially here in the United States. I don't know much about Australia, but the United States, they got the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and their group, the Intelligence Activity Research Projects, Intelligence Research Projects Agency, which is like the DARPA for intelligence communities. They set up just a one-stop shop in April of this year called the Intelligence Community Data Consortium to buy up all that data, to use it wherever they see fit. So, and what they need to do is have that public-private partnership, which we again, it doesn't matter who is in charge of government and things. The machine keeps rolling. So, yeah, that's pretty much the point I'm trying to get across. Is that it's and even the defense departments, everything wants to know what you're doing in order to. And I think you alluded to this earlier. Is to those little breadcrumbs and trails is to predict future behavior and then to control and manipulate it. It doesn't. And again, you can say it's all good right now. We're going to use it for this purpose. It's beneficial. But whatever the next administration comes in, or there's an emergency that is declared, whether it's real or perceived, just like vaccine passports, that's going to be kicked into full force.
Yeah, Tony, how do you see the landscape in the next 6 months? Because things, I mean, and I said at the start of this that it's like this avalanche that's just reaching this, it's getting faster and faster. And I don't think we can stop it. I really don't think we can. We don't want a lot of things government are doing, and we have referendums on many of those cases, and they don't give a rat's about it. Where do you see the landscape? And you're a lawyer and a criminologist. Will this stop crime, or will they just find a way around that too? You need your microphone on again, Tony. Just push that button.
First and foremost, Emile Durkheim spoke about that, especially in criminological and sociological theory, that as the evolution of man proceeds, you may find a solution to a crime, but then the criminals get smarter, if that makes any sense, right? So you'll never stop the crime. It'll always occur. And to that extent, I don't believe that's going to be the case. And as one evolves, the other one evolves with it. Again, obviously, we have these ideal situations and these utopian style grand schemes as to how we'd like society to operate. And let's face it, look, crime does ravage society, and it's not a good thing. And anything we can do to obviously reduce it and stop and keep people safe is a very important thing. Again, on principle, the digital ID is sold as a safety mechanism, and just like anything else out there, whether we've got a restraining order and things like that, yes, it generally it can prevent some, but it doesn't stop everything, and it's not going to stop everything. And let's face that. And that's a fact we all need to face. But generally, I think, Mike, going back onto what you said there, it's too far down the track. And it's like, when you're rained on, the cloud's a kilometre away by the time the actual water hits you. And that's exactly where we are right now. I guess it's a case of damage control. But going back to what Tim and Steve, again, I see this as a larger structural issue. It's a societal issue. It's one that pervades many different areas. And as my Spectator article earlier last month goes to, I talk about and this is exactly where we're heading, they've laid the plumbing for the home to be built around, okay? And as each floor, as each wall, as each area of that house expands, that plumbing will then expand. Essentially, what we're talking about here is mission creep, right? So we're going to start here where we started, especially here in Australia, with digital ID and MyGov. Okay, again, I'm not a I'm a big believer in free speech and I'm a purist. I see myself as being a purist. And I lived in the United States. I just came from a big 5-week vacation on COVID and other related issues in the United States. My son lives over there. But the issue here is this, is that when we come down to these very precious ideas of privacy, because that's where it is. Remember, the issues here are this. There may be a breach and there may be one that's proven. There's an acknowledgement one from one party, so they concede that's occurred, but there is no remedy available. This is fundamental to any freedom-loving society, that if you have the rule of law, then if there is a breach or of some sort and it is known, it's conceded, then what is the remedy to the consumer? Okay, you've lost my biometrics, you've lost all my data, you've lost all this. They have now totally gone through my bank accounts, they've ripped me dry. You just say to me, look, the Privacy Act only tells me to say sorry. That's all I have to do, or there's been a breach. How do I remedy that person and bring them whole again? I think that's one of the issues we're not looking at here. But in addition to that, when you look at, say, Section 12 of the Digital ID Act, it talks about being a fit and proper person. It's a broad test that the government's going to bring in terms of how they're going to look at how they manage, these media organisations and accredit them and this and that. So people such as, you look at Steve. Steve's done that, commanding the narrative there for some time there, and yourself, Mike. How do they accredit that? And remember, there are various sections in this where, the accreditation can be revoked, it can be suspended, it can be amended at any time. At the end of the day, that then gets pinned to this digital identity issue that we've got going. We need to reframe all this and say to ourselves, well, what do we do in these circumstances? Because now we're getting very close to a highly manipulated society, and it brings me back to the manipulation of the media. Who are they accrediting if in circumstances we've seen the January 6 issue, obviously the allegations against some of those larger media organisations, if they're the ones engaging in some of the most heinous, and let's talk of doctoring something as the allegation, that is a heinous, reprehensible. Okay, how are they accredited? How are they not losing their accreditation? And why are they not being suspended from their bank accounts? Because remember, this is all going to tie into your bank accounts and what you do on a daily basis. This is all going to come tying in. It's that surveillance society where, as Tim was saying, it's this mission creep. They've laid the plumbing. We now got to get behind it. So you look at the personal carbon allowances. That's going to be tied into your identity. So how much of a footprint? And again, Tripp has been on to. Sorry, Stephen Tripp. He's been onto this for some time now. I published in the area in 2014 about carbon credits and all this sort of stuff. This is all going to be tied to certain areas, and so when we start putting all that together, well, the accreditation process, and this is that wider structural issue that I talk about, when we start looking at that, you've got misinformation, disinformation, as we have here in Australia, we're Chris information, that's Chris Bowen. So we've got these three forms of information that are slowly creeping across, but what we need to do here is have a look at those wider structural issues. We need to understand where it's going. I think safety and security, that to me has always been something I support. But how far do we take it, and how far do we allow the government to intrude upon that? And at what point, and do we then take liability away, which is pursuant to the rule
You're
of law.
talking about liability, like in terms of even media, and how they're allowed to spout these things. Um, a lot of them, look at their funding. Where's that come from? A huge part of it, $300 million, I think, comes from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or just now the Gates Foundation. Gates Foundation funds the WHO, the UN, and all these groups that are they're like inbred with one another. MOSIP, the Digital Public Goods Alliance, like every single one of them partners with one another to put this information out there. And so now they're saying the UN, Media Matters, they're saying that if you question climate change net zero policies, you are spreading disinformation because they call that strategic skepticism. And so anything that goes against UN Agenda 2030 SDGs, any information that can impede progress on that is now considered disinformation, misinformation. So now anything you say, you've got the digital identity. You have to prove who you are. Internet passports to get online. Online age verification, that's an internet passport. Doesn't matter who you are. It can be a digital ID. It can be just the biometrics. Once again, it doesn't. So once you say something, do that. They will then be able to do the whole carbon credit, the carbon allowance, carbon credits, and stuff like that. If you question this, or if you're not with this, shut this one part off. The programmable digital currencies, you become programmable. You are the one. You are the system. You are the one. Your biometrics. You are that digital thing. It's like a voodoo doll. Whatever you do here in the digital realm has repercussions in the physical realm and vice versa. So that's the control that can happen, and that who's accountable. Well, that's why I don't trust. I'm sorry, I don't trust politicians. I don't trust the media. I work in media. I don't trust nobody. So that's the public-private partnerships. Follow the money and follow the influence.
Yeah, but the big problem is a lot of this stuff has already been happening. It's been happening for a while. I mean, the last time we had Tony Nikolic on our podcast, that was deleted off YouTube because obviously Tony said some naughty words, otherwise known as the truth, and they didn't like that. So the problem with the digital ID is that if that were to happen in the future, if it was a centralized digital ID, suddenly I might lose my access to banking, or I might lose my access to be able to travel. But I think the biggest problem is not relying on the politicians to drive the change, or to point out the things that they're doing wrong. I think we need to take the people of the world, not just here in Australia, because this digital ID is being rolled out everywhere.
It is.
We need to take the people of the world on a journey. I mean, let's go back to COVID. I mean, when I go to work and I talk to people about the COVID period, they say it's the biggest holiday, the best holiday they've ever had. They got to go surfing all day. They got to go be paid for it. I mean, I think only the people that are speaking out to it are the people that were affected negatively. Either they lost their job, like myself, or Tony's represented a lot of people that lost their jobs, or they weren't able to see loved ones. But I think for the majority of people out there, they saw it as a massive holiday. I didn't have to go to work, or now I get to work from home because they've brought in this policy since COVID. I mean, this is how they implement these programs. And as I can't remember, I think it was Tony that said one of the things that they're saying about this digital ID, it's going to provide more convenience. A lot of the people out there are going to fall for that, and they're going to go along with it because of that. So I think we need to take direction of the narrative, not just bombard people with all the negative aspects that could potentially happen. And I think we are heading towards that. I'm gravely concerned about a digital ID, but I think we need to frame it, maybe some of the benefits or some of the solutions to try and steer things away. I
But
mean,
why? What are the benefits? Like, why do you think we need one? Like you say, there's lots of pitfalls. You agree with us and everything, but you still want it. So why?
Look, I think if there's a situation like going back to my interview with Rick Richardson, where he says that if you did have a decentralized system, it could actually protect your privacy better than physical forms. I mean, you wouldn't have to hand over your driver's license or your passport with all your information on there. Now you would only be select. I mean, we see this already. Facebook have a similar system. Like if you want to
Right.
use Expedia, for
That's not
example,
good. That's not a good
Do we
That's
need
not a
it
good
though?
comparison, is it? Facebook is probably a horrible comparison.
is
Do we
but
need it? Why do we need it? It's like yes,
I
it's like you're saying it's like yes, it's inevitable, it's coming, so let's operate within it, basically, right? Or
Well, look, I mean,
what do
what
you
else? How are you going to get the Australian people or the people of the world to push back against it? I mean, Keir Starmer came out recently and said you're going to need a digital ID to be able to work. I mean,
right?
I think there's pushback in the UK about that, but in Australia,
There is
the government
pushback.
Yeah, the government's saying no, this is going to be voluntary. Even these age
So where does it
verification.
end? Where do you draw the line? It's like what you're talking about, like you have nothing to hide, privacy and all that stuff. It's just like, why not just record your entire life and be naked and just have a camera in your
Happening
house
now.
24/7?
do you, do you
This is
trust your
well,
phone?
well, this is even
I
going
live
further.
stream all the
Let's be
time with that sort of
centralized,
stuff. Well, there you go.
let's be
I
centralized.
don't get
It
many
would better
views.
be re-aggregated again. So I
Can I
don't
ask,
I
look,
don't
mate,
see any
I'm
need
I'm
for
I'm
digital ID.
completely on board with what you're saying. I don't think we need it. I mean, I think the paper system that we've got now, I mean, it's
Yeah, we
works
don't.
for forever since. I mean, there's been no issues. I think as I said, I mean, this stuff is being pushed by these global bodies that want to roll out this stuff, and they're probably looking to the China model and going, "No, that's working great. Let's roll that out everywhere." But my biggest thing is, how do you get the public on board with you? I mean, we had the
I think the
misinformation.
public already is on board, aren't they?
Well, are they pushing back enough though? I
No, they're
mean,
not. And
yeah,
No.
that's not.
No.
But in the UK, though, they are pushing back.
Oh,
We've
yeah, 3
seen.
million petitions that the government just says, nah, screw that.
Yeah, and
We're
that's
going to
it.
go
And they
through
don't really give a rat's what you think. I need to ask all of you, if you wouldn't mind. We know that government is as slippery as eel's poo, or eel shit, as we would say. I just want to know bureaucracy, the bureaucrats, they with their monitoring everything. How long is it before we know that there is a social credit score in place? Because I mean, if they look at, say, Mike Ryan and Tony Nikolic, all they do is talk about having a beer, rat bags, hang around criminals, all that sort of stuff, bad people. Our social credit score, whether we know it or not, whether we want it or not, it's going to be in place. Tim, how do we, first of all, what do we do about that? Because that's going to be, that is part and parcel of the whole thing. All your information, as Tony mentioned before, is there for them to determine, and with algorithms, determine whether you are a good citizen of the world or whether you're a piece of crap of the world.
Yeah, solutions really don't have many because, when they talk about digital ID, smartphone, like people say, this is the hill to die on. I will never sign up for digital ID. Doesn't matter. There's cameras, there's iris scans, there's hand swipes, there's go to airports. Those are the perfect sandboxes for this whole thing. So it's not going to matter whether you sign up for it or not. So fighting back or resisting, only thing I can think of is what we're doing now is talking about it, spreading awareness, because I'm pretty sure there's lots of people smarter than me that come up with solutions. And there are people that come up with solutions. I mean, what's good for the goose is not always good for the gander. What's good for one person, not for everyone. But I mean, there's different ways. So people say exit and build. You can go create parallel systems, have someone else innovate something. These things slow it down. I'm not saying that these are catch-all, like this is how you stop it. But for me personally, it's where you draw the line for yourself personally. You got to look inward. For me, I maneuver it the way I can. Okay, no apps on a smartphone. Okay, what if something else comes in? For me, the line in the sand was forcing me to inject myself in order to travel or do that. Or get into a pub or restaurant or whatever. That was like, nope, never going to do that. No. But as far as these systems that come along, okay, whatever the identification system is, yeah, it's already here. The system is already in place. So I like ridicule. I like comedy. I like ridicule. I like to expose whoever's putting, show who's doing this. Where does it come from? It's not coming from the people. It's coming from the same inbred groups of this global public-private partnership. And just when the emperor has no clothes, then they have less power. So that's why I just try to speak truth to power, show the world what's happening, and then they can make up their own minds. I know we're doing it already, and we're saying that there isn't much pushback. But I think once it starts affecting their lives, or even their children, especially if it affects children, then there's going to be uprising.
We saw that with the misinformation, disinformation legislation. That was scrapped because of the pushback that we saw from people writing petitions, organised.
They've still gotten a similar thing through because now to protect us from the evils of the internet, they can. I mean, look at the they can do what they like to us, especially with the digital ID and all the other things that surround it. And if you look at a question that came in from one of our audience has said, what happened to the politicians? I mean, the Conservatives. And the Shadow Minister for Communication just recently said on TV that by the way, this is the Conservatives going to look after our independence and protect us from government overreach. She said that government needs to control internet. Tony, if she says that and the government is doing exactly what she wants, why do we have an opposition? And what hope do we have, Tony?
Yeah, I've written about this extensively. I think a number of you actually know. I don't think we have an opposition here in Australia. Number one, the Liberal Party, and I borrowed this idea from the Americans. They sneeze, we catch a cold. They've got the rhinos, we've got the linos. Okay, Liberal in name only. Okay, I've been saying that for some time now. We don't have an opposition. They don't have a spine. They cannot wear a crown because the crown's got nothing to stick on because the spine is so weak. What we are requiring deeply here is a strong conservative base, which we do have in Australia. And I know I just came from the USA, and many of you may know I went into the Senate on the September the 9th there, and there was an inquiry on scientific misconduct, and before Senator Ron Johnson, and I was invited to sit in the front rows there because of my contributions, obviously down here, and I sat with many of the attorneys and met some very, very lovely people, and I just see the level of freedom of speech in the USA, and I'm sure Tim would acknowledge it's there, but we're actually eroding much faster here in Australia. And I could see that transition, that there was so much more going on in the USA. But what did concern me, I was in Texas and I went into a store. And in order for me to get into the store, I had to buzz my credit card. And for me to go into Texas and see that was amazing. And for me to check into my airline flights, I logged in online. They looked at my passport, verified my passport online. I didn't do anything the next day. I just got on my flight, and it was already in the system. As I said, the cloud has already dispensed its rain. We've been hit. The issue is, what do we do from here? Yes, we do need a strong conservative base. We need to implement that conservative base. We need to unite under that. Once families start feeling just how terrible this is, and they go to the store, and I can tell you right now, people here in Australia have been debanked. I've seen the letters. There's people here who are saying, I'm sorry, we don't like what you've done. You've got 28 days to withdraw all your savings from this bank and go elsewhere. Now, this is that private-public partnership that I also raised in my 7 July letter 2021 when COVID hit, where I said they're going to implement this fear campaign. It's going to be a private government public related partnership whereby the government's going to influence the powers, and it's the private sector who's going to push that on you. Now, when you go to do your freedom of information, you can't really get one on a private organisation. You really got to do, like a pre-discovery process and institute proceedings, where you can do that on the public, and even there you have this staircase that goes around and comes back up and then goes around because you get nothing out of it. And when you do, there's so much black ink, you kind of wonder how much the taxpayers are paying in that. So the issue really here is we have this elusive sense of politics. It's illusory, okay? That's what I'm saying. It's an illusion, okay? And what you're seeing in the USA that for me, one of the striking moments in the USA, and I really appreciated being there, and I get goosebumps when I talk about it, is free speech is still very strong, and they stick up for it. And you know what? You say something, and they will pull you up. They will pull you up, and they say, no, man, we did not lose that war of independence. We fought for a reason. Australia doesn't have that culture. We don't have that fighting spirit. We have people who have cowered to this dominant narrative whereby we think that we need to be ruled. Well, no, stand up, respectfully say no. We're not throwing Molotov cocktails. We're not overturning cars. We're not attacking federal buildings. We're not doing nothing like that. We're doing it just as they did it over there. And when I sat at 3:30 a.m. in line at the Charlie Kirk Memorial in Phoenix, Arizona, they were praying. They were talking about how to do this the right way, to do it by peace. They weren't attacking people. They weren't doing anything. God bless America. God bless you. And you know what? Let's do it. And this is the Australia we've lost. Australians, I will tell you, we are, I'm not kidding you, so close. And in fact, Chapter 3 of our respective constitutions, Article 3, Chapter 3, it's not cut and paste, but you can't get much closer. Okay, and that's
And,
that's
and, and just real quick, when you're talking about free speech and the other way, yeah, stand up for what someone is saying, but at the same time, if you say something stupid or asinine or completely horrendous and heinous, then you're going to get attacked and ridiculed as well in turn. That's the beauty of it, and that's what I hate about every single the EU. What I see in the UK or Australia is when people's like, no, that's misinformation, disinformation. We got to stamp that out. There's no debate. There's nothing. There's no like one side or like it's only one side, and it only gets
yes,
worse when it gets digital. When you get shut up
absolutely,
from it,
Tim.
and what happened with corruption? Look what happened in Nepal. They had lots of corruption, right? Okay, and then they all of a sudden banned social media for like 2 seconds. There was a freaking uprising, and you're talking about what happened to the politicians. I'm not calling for that at all. No, I'm just saying cause and effect. For every single action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. When something bubbles up and boils over to a point, it's going to explode. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah,
We need to stop relying on the politicians. That's for one. But the power is with the people at the end of the day. But how do we get the people on side? I mean, I think we need to learn.
I disagree. The power is not with the people. And what we've seen from the Labor government the last few months or years, it is not with the people. They are doing what they want to do. And if you look at renewables, you look at the internet, if you look at digital ID, if you look at everything in our life, we can't do anything about it. We can't vote for the opposition because they are the same as what we have in government. So I disagree with you, Stephen, about that.
I think what Stephen, if I could just jump in.
The people are not doing enough, though. That's the issue. I mean, the power is with the people, but the people have to get active. I mean, I think we need to go back to COVID. I think all of us here, we spoke out against the mandates, the lockdowns. I mean, Tony Nikolic was at the forefront of it here in this country. I'm sure that people are not banging on Tony's door going, how did you know? How did you know not to take the vaccine? How did you know that lockdowns were going to adversely affect children and adversely affect our economy and everything like that? How did you know, Tony? People are not doing that because somehow, our message is not resonating with the Australian people. So I think we need to focus more on how to bring the people along with us. And if you could get the people active and engaged and pushing back against this stuff, then it all finishes. I mean, if you go back to COVID, all the lockdowns would have ended if all the people were marching on the streets, and it eventually did when we had the epic march here. I mean, no one gives that march credit, but it had an effect. People have to get active, but we have to bring those people along. We can't just be up there trying to scare them and threaten them and go say, well, government's going to rule your life, and they're walking out their front door going, well, the sun's shining, I can go to the beach, I can go to the pub and get a beer. They're not worried about what's happening because it's not affecting them yet. I think we need to control the narrative and take it in a positive direction and get the people on side and get them to stop relying on the politicians.
I think that's a great point.
Here's a question for you, Tony. How do we get people on side? Because at the moment we have independents like ourselves. We were very big once and got massacred, so we basically disappeared, become an outpost now. Then we have all these little podcasters around the place. They're doing the same thing. A lot of also paid by the opposition to have a particular narrative, but they're still there. How can we change when the Australian people, first of all, are quite, it's part of our heritage is she'll be right, mate, which some would describe as apathy, but she'll be right, mate. Hasn't that been the reason, and isn't that the main problem at the moment by getting the people involved? Because do they want to become involved, or are they just going to go along for the ride before it's too late? And if you look at the 90s and the 80s, what we had then, what we could do, probably some of that is highly suspect now, but all those freedoms that we had are gone. And I don't see, can you tell me the latest or the last time you saw a headline or you had people saying, I had all those rights in the 80s or the 90s, but no one talks about it because It's just this creep. And the creep I was saying before is like an avalanche. And I think it is just too late. Government know that they can do what they like, that the Australian public, whether in the UK, you had 3 million marching with Tommy Robinson. There was still 72 million that didn't. Fair enough. And if you look at how they do ratings and stuff, at 10, you're still going to have the majority of English. The people aren't going to do much. Then you got in the UK, you have their voting system. You don't have to vote. So therefore, those with the strongest members are going to go out. And then Stephen mentioned before about the digital ID. Well, Starmer said the digital ID, you can't work. It was to stop the illegal immigrants. And that did nothing. So back to my question for you, Tony. What can we do? I mean, the Australian public, is our problem, is it simply because of our heritage that she'll be right, mate, which, as I said before, some call it apathy?
Yes, indeed. What was the old saying? Give them bread and circuses and you'll consume their minds and they won't get involved, right? I think when we look at it in that sense, I think a lot of Australia has been consumed by that era or still going. But one of the very important topics I've said in many social media posts, and I think we all know, and as Stephen Tripp and yourself will also know, that I'm very heavily censored, not because I'm saying the wrong thing, is because I'm actually, doing my best to wake people up. And perhaps one of the best ways I can articulate that is by stating that during COVID, if you recall, they locked down the, churches and places of religion. So what I did, I went out there and I grabbed some pastors and priests and obviously open the look at how we were looking at the Jewish community and obviously opening synagogues. And one of the key aspects of that was the social distancing measures. And I ran an urgent injunction, and this is in early 2021 before the big Qassam case, but this is going to hit home to every single one of you how powerful the people really are, okay? And I'm going to tell you how powerful they really are. It's because when we were doing that case and there was an urgent injunction, I specifically went to every religion. Really, it was a lot of the Christian and the Jewish community did come forward. And what we were doing, we timed it for Rosh Hashanah and coming into getting close to Christmas, those very important holidays that people cherish. And so we timed it to get into that area. But it was about the social distancing measures that you couldn't go and pray or, pay respects to your divine entities. So in that sense, what we established was, if you're not allowing me to go to church, but then the orders are allowing me to go to a brothel, well, because that's what the orders said. And I pushed that out there. And this is the remarkable power of the people, right? The Jewish community on Rosh Hashanah went out and blew the Shahava because this is what I wanted them to do. And so they all came out the front in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, and that was saying, you know what? Someone's standing up. Someone's standing up. They started blowing the Shahava. People started saying, hey, what's going on? How come I can't do this? But you tell me how I can't breach a social distancing measure by attending a brothel. Please tell me. So there was something dramatically contrasting, and it was just really what I was pointing out is just how morally bankrupt our governments were.
Yeah, it was the same in the United States with the George Floyd riots and the whole race riots that were happening. Okay,
yeah,
you can go out and protest because even Rochelle Walensky, who was CDC director at the time, said, no, racial issues are public health issues. So that's okay. Yeah. Go out and protest, no social distancing. But no, if you want to go to church, if you want to go gather with your family, there's your neighbors over there. You better snitch on them.
Yeah, well, we had that here. So one of the issues was, and it was merely 2 days later, the Premier at the time, who has been embroiled in those corruption allegations with respect to Optus, Gladys Berejiklian, came out only a number of days later or so and said, you know what, the vaccinated can return to church, and 2 weeks later, the unvaccinated. The point I was making was this, is that it worked. It worked, but then we started getting censored, right? And so when I talk to everyone, and again, if you go to my Spectator article, truth is knowledge held back by power. That is the art of propaganda to where we start seeing the Digital ID Act, which is going to accredit and authenticate people. These are the people who are then going to guide what information people see. People are being programmed to operate in a certain area. Therefore, when they pull out their vaccine passport, what are they wanting to do? Well, they're either going to get bread or going to a circus, metaphorically speaking, because they want to go to a bar or they want to go to a football game or a netball game. This is what they're doing. You know, the more things change, the more things stay the same. The issue is this. I totally agree. And I think, Mike, you're correct. And Stephen, Tripp, absolutely, and Tim, we're all correct in the sense of this. There are wider structural issues. Those wider structural are being constrained by virtue of power. We have that power, and I proved it not only during COVID, but during that where we opened up the churches and synagogues. Yes, you can, and you need to break through. That is why when I attack these submissions in the Senate, I attack the manipulative purpose of controlling the information, because this is how they are programming society.
Can I ask, as we wind up, because we are running out of time now, and feel free to have the platform on this one. Hovori Moric and I he and I were very much alike when he used to work for us. He's Hovori Moric, by the way, if you should see his podcast. He is one of the very, very best. And we would be surrounded by it, which is fine and dandy, surrounded by people who are saying that the light at the end of the tunnel is getting stronger and brighter, and we can't wait to get out of it because there's the new world. He and I would always say, it's a train and it's getting faster. And people would look at us and go, no. At this stage, I would say that he and I are entirely correct. So the question I have for all of you, just to, and as I said, go for as long as you like, but not more than 3 hours, because we have to eat and go to bed. I'm just thinking though, Stephen, is it too late?
It's never too late. Look, I'm very concerned. I have 2 young kids, both under 4, and I think about their future, and I'm horrified. I mean, that's what drives me to do everything that I do in this space, because I am very, very concerned. But if you have that defeatist attitude, then we might as well roll over and just let the government trample all over us. I think there are always opportunities to push back. There are always opportunities to turn things around and move things into a positive direction. I don't have all the answers of what that solution might be, but we just have to keep active. We have to keep going, and we can never stop. And sometimes it's darkest just before the dawn, and hopefully that is what works out, because we don't want to be in a situation where suddenly we're going through 80 years of socialist Russia and we're going to be living in a gulag or something like that. We are blessed to live in this country. A lot of people around the world are blessed to live in the countries that they live in. We do live in predominantly safe and peaceful societies, but we need to keep it that way. And we are seeing this slow decline and this trajectory into a place that we don't want to go. And we can see that. I don't know if all the people around the world can see that. I think they can. Maybe they're still being the silent majority, but I think we need to have more discussions like this, and we need to propose more solutions, excite people, and try and get them on our tram, on our track, and inspire people to come with us. I don't have all the answers of what that might be, but I think we definitely need to be moving in that direction.
Tim Hinchliffe, question to you: is it too late?
As Steve said, no, it's never too late. And anything, what I love is there's always the unexpected. A little quote from Bridge on the River Kwai. There's always the unexpected. So COVID, don't call it COVID, lockdowns, that woke up a lot of people. A lot of people took some things that later they regretted, and they'd said never again. They woke up to it. So even it can be some big global phenomenon. It could be, again, like I said earlier about the emperor wears no clothes. Once the veil is lifted and people start to see and start to wake up more and more, anything can happen. There could be just one event or two or a couple or three that just kind of spirals and leads into something greater. So that's what I love about the future. We knew about what was happening before with the lockdowns and stuff, because they told us World Economic Forum, United Nations, ID, 4D, World Bank, all those said we're going with digital ID. We're going to go with vaccine passports, even before a vaccine came out. So we saw that's how we predict the future a little bit. But beyond that, the reaction, from the public, from the people, from us, from everyone, by just spreading the word, letting people know what's going on, that can just anything can happen. Anyone can just arise and wake up, and you see these little people. Just one person on social media can just spark something that creates a movement, and so from there, I'm really I'm optimistic there.
And Tony Nikolic, you're wrapping up your court case. You're putting forward your argument to the jury. Is it too late?
Again, I agree wholeheartedly. It's never too late. The issue is how far down the track are we? I think we're considerably far down that track. But again, we can always come back and balance things out. But it's all going to come down to how we, as a community, unite around these issues that traditionally we were against, but now we've been manipulated and programmed into consuming that. Well, it must be good for me. Well, it's not. And just again, same with those passports and those QR codes during the COVID era, they weren't really there for any other reason. And as we know, that period there actually illuminated people, and I know people who were quite hard on supporting the issue who are now totally against it, saying that's never going to happen again. So in one sense, the slap across the face has actually been that little uplifting area where people are saying, you know what, I'm going to stand up to this. And it's not just here. I can assure you, when I was in the USA and I met with a lot of people, and I think I went to about 15 different states and met with a lot of people who on the ground are with it. They're with it. They're really waking up, or they've woken up. And I think we've passed peak woke, and we call it peak woke for a reason, because that peak woke has gone behind us. So I think this issue of programmability, manipulation, and the way people are being carted into certain paddocks is now being reduced. And the only way we do that is by doing what we do, is engage. And I do say another thing is this: when we get these areas, regardless of political party, I know some do and some don't agree with the process, but at the end of the day, the lesser of two evils, or the lesser of the most inconvenient, is the one you want to go to. And I urge people to think at the policy, not the party or the person, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to get you there. Okay? That's what's going to get you there.
Gentlemen, Stephen Tripp, Tim Hinchliffe, and Tony Nikolic, thank you very much. I think that when I say too late, I think we should fight like hell. But at the moment, and you would all agree, to go up against government and the bureaucracy, whether it's state, local, or federal, is a very hard task. I think it is most likely too late. However, it does not mean we don't stop fighting. We need to fight. If we don't fight, I think we just, as a civilization, we just roll over and die. But as for what governments want to do, I think they're going to do what they want to do. We cannot stop it. I do not think we can stop whatever they want to do. And if you want to see, for example, look at the US. All of you look at the US. We have Pam Bondi saying we've got to stamp out hate speech. And I do recall the UK government, the Australian government, all other governments, that's how they started. First of all, got to stamp out hate speech, and look at it now. Look where we're at now. So yes, I do think it's too late, but it doesn't mean we don't stop fighting, because if we stop fighting, then as a civilization, I think we're stuffed. And look at the rest of the world. They look at the West and think, you guys are nuts. You're upside down. Men are women, women are men, or whatever they want to be. You haven't got a moral compass. You're destroying the planet to save it, and so forth. Yeah, the West is upside down. And I think for that reason, my humble opinion, and deserves a discussion over a few beers, I would imagine, Tony, yes, it is too late. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being part of the panel. This is The Protagonists, and this is The World Today.